So what we do is facilitate academic and think tank focused groups, just to kind of see a more developed a way of their functioning in Iran, hopefully in the near future. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, please?
So my name is Bryce. I am a writer, an organizer, and a graduate student based out of Indiana. I go to Indiana University, and I'm pursuing a PhD in informatics. I also write about media criticism, criticizing the way that corporate media in the United States and the West more broadly distorts or alters the picture of reality in support of state objectives.
Okay. Thank you very much for agreeing to have this interview with us. What do you think, just generally, about what happened between Iran and Israel and the U.S. intervention just about 2 weeks ago? Do you think this was something that you thought would happen? This was something that you expected, or was it out of the blue for you as well?
So this was something that it wasn't out of the blue. The United States had been negotiating or falsely negotiating with Iran for the entirety of the Trump administration. And Trump had given Iran a deadline to come to a deal. However, while doing that, Iran was never offered any serious terms that were close to the JCPOA, which Trump had abandoned back in 2018. And so Trump's negotiating tactics seemed to be deliberately aimed at preventing a negotiated settlement. The deadline that Iran was given ended on June the 12th, which was the day that Israel attacked Iran. And since then, you've seen that the foreign policy establishment in the United States talk about bombing Iran. And while Trump did say that he was willing to negotiate with them, he did end up bombing them. And so it wasn't out of the blue, and it keeps in line with the longstanding U.S. policy of hostility towards Iran that dates back, well, I guess to the 50s, but especially through the neoconservative era brought about in the late 1990s, with advisors like Richard Pearl and David Wormser penning the Clean Break document, which announced that the U.S.-Israeli policy would be to prevent any sort of peer or near-peer power in the region to be able to exercise any force that could contradict or act as a counterbalance to American force, and therefore they had to be eliminated. Iran, major regional power, presented a threat to complete U.S. and Israeli dominance, and has been a target ever since.
Do you think Israel is the main, the main reason why Trump is acting this way? I mean, you're saying that this has been the way Trump is acting with Iran is something that we've been seeing for many years. But do you think right now, where we are standing now, and do you think Israel is the reason why Trump is so invested in the Middle East?
I think, broadly speaking, Israel is one of the major constituencies that make up this neoconservative, pro-Israel, pro-Zionist consensus within Washington. The neoconservatives don't just include Israelis and Israel objectives. It includes broader American objectives. And in many ways, those objectives overlap. And so the consensus that has developed has been one of protecting Israel and protecting the U.S. influence in the Middle East. And Iran, like I said earlier, has been a significant challenge to that by virtue of it being stronger and able to project power in ways that the U.S. may not like. And so I think that the Israel lobby is one big constituency within the foreign policy development in the U.S., but there's also weapons manufacturers and just imperial planners who believe in U.S. primacy and believe in fighting against this new multipolar world that's being developed in the East and with the BRICS bloc.
Yeah. So one thing that you focus on a lot is, as you said in the beginning, is the fact that the media isn't very truthful, I guess, in the West. The Western media that is kind of that gets its force from I guess Trump and sources around him aren't very truthful about stuff that are happening. You criticized the New York Times about how they portrayed the war in Iran. What do you think? Why do you think they do this, and why do you think? And do you think people in the U.S. especially believe this type of view that is given to them through the press?
Yeah, I think one of the primary roles of the press with respect to American foreign policy is to, as Chomsky and Herman developed, decades ago, to manufacture consent on behalf of the state objectives, to give the public a view that reflects the priorities and worldviews of the elites in Washington, who have their own motives when it comes to developing this foreign policy. I wrote this article about the New York Times because, of course, the Times is one of the most important papers in the United States and therefore, sadly, the world, because the day after the Trump attacks on Iran and a week after the Israeli surprise attacks on Iran, the New York Times offered some criticism of the attacks in a way that didn't actually criticize whether or not the attacks should have happened. Their criticism was that America must not rush into a war against Iran. The key word there being rush, not go. The New York Times criticism was that Trump was not using the standard legal mechanisms that constitutional scholars would consider necessary for going to war with Iran. On the question of whether or not we should bomb Iran, on the question of whether or not America has the right to go halfway across the world and use violence in order to achieve its political objectives, the New York Times explicitly said that they're not taking a position on that, but they offered a justification for why that might be a good idea. And if you read their justification, it parrots exactly what the Trump administration has been saying. And if you accept their premises, then yes, the only question is not whether or not we should attack Iran, it's how or when we should attack Iran. And this justification that they offered is very interesting. It's something I call like a twofold lie. The first part of the lie is that Iran is developing nuclear weapons. And the second part of that is that were Iran to get nuclear weapons, it would destabilize the region because Iran would want to use them offensively in a first strike against Israel. Both of these are completely devoid of the facts. On the first lie, both the United States intelligence and the IAEA have declared that there is no evidence whatsoever that Iran is embarking on a nuclear program to build a nuclear weapon. They have accused Iran of enriching uranium beyond the necessary requirements for civilian use, which is true, but they've only done this in response to the U.S. pulling out of the JCPOA, which was an agreement that Iran enthusiastically negotiated in order to cool tensions with the West and to promise not to develop a nuclear weapon. They adhered to it by all accounts, even American accounts, but Trump administration pulled out. So in response, Iran began enriching their uranium. However, there's no evidence that the supreme leader, the Ayatollah, has rescinded I believe it was 2003 fatwa that declared that nuclear weapons were not a policy of the Iranian government. Now, the second part of that lie is that were Iran to get nuclear weapons, it would be dangerous to Israel and other neighbors and the rest of the world. This also isn't supported by any evidence whatsoever. In fact, when the RAND Corporation, military-funded think tank, did a study on behalf of the United States military, looking into what Iranians believe about the use of nuclear weapons, they looked at military journals, public statements from officials, and other investigations into the people relevant in policymaking. they found that far from being useful offensive weapons, the Iranians believe that they're only useful insofar as they can deter and defend against exactly the kind of attack that Trump and Netanyahu just launched on Iran. And the logic is fairly straightforward. If Iran were to use a nuclear weapon on Israel for any reason, well, the next thing that would happen would be Iran would be hit with nuclear weapons themselves from the United States or others. That would, of course, destroy Iran in the regime. And this is not generally something they're interested in. They have interest in preserving themselves and continuing their existence. This idea that they would be suicidal is really more of a racist caricature developed by people in the West about the fanaticism of people in the Persia and the Middle East. It bears no resemblance to reality. So the New York Times essentially parroted this twofold lie in order to promote the idea that there is a good reason to bomb Iran. And I just don't think that holds up to scrutiny. And so I think when our major media institutions give justifications for violent activities from this, our government, our regime, then that deserves to be called out.
Yeah, exactly. This is just an interesting question that comes to my mind, is that do you think that after the war, the views of people in America or people in the West have changed towards the Islamic Republic of Iran? Do you think it has gone better? Because some things you can see, like in social media, is that there is kind of a shift, that people are seeing a more positive side than they were seeing before. Do you think that as you said, the caricature is now kind of falling down and it's failing, and people are realizing other stuff than they did before?
For young people especially, definitely. There is a major gap in the American public of understanding between the people who rely on traditional gate-kept media organizations, typically the corporate media like the CNNs, the New York Times, and et cetera. There's a gap between the people who follow those media and the people who have gotten their news and get their analysis from alternative media sources, usually through social media, but also alternative magazines and publications, things like that. The people who adhere to the older traditional media, well, they have views that really are traditionally American, jingoistic, Islamophobic. They have this view that was especially prevalent in the wake of the 9/11 attacks, that the Muslim world hates America because of their freedoms, and that to protect the West, we must go and bomb them. And to the extent that the Muslims are human, they're actually oppressed by their masters, and therefore it's our duty to go and bomb them. That was a very prominent feature of American media coverage of the Iran attack. However, in other venues, like all social media, it's very different. The younger people are able to access a more wide variety of opinions. They can hear from Iranians themselves. They can hear people dismantling or at least critiquing dominant U.S. narratives in ways that simply aren't available in traditional media venues. And so the anti-war sentiment, or at least the war critical sentiment, has really been quite high relative to other periods in American history. And it's concentrated especially in those who have higher mistrust in the media and have access to alternative sources. I think this is a positive development. However, it doesn't translate into policymaking. America's policymaking isn't democratic, despite what the marketing material may say. The policy for empire and military is largely concentrated in a few dozen think tanks, a few dozen, special interest groups, weapons manufacturers, and lobbyists for oil companies, or whatever the constituents of the global American economic system are. That's where foreign policy is developed, and they're very insulated from the public opinion of the your average anti-war activist.
So, with this in mind, the fact that the foreign policy, especially in the US, is very separate from what people are thinking and is not really affected by it. What do you think the role of academics and activists are in these type of times? Like, as a US citizen and someone that has been very active in the university kind of setting, what do you think people should be doing to kind of at least try to have the most amount of influence on the policymakers? Is it even possible to hope to have some influence on them, or is it just something that cannot ever be reached?
I don't think that it's hopeless. I think the role of academics and people of good conscience who want to see a better world is to continue speaking out and continue writing and meeting and organizing around these issues. The reason that your average congressman and senator is so devoted to the empire state and the military industrial complex isn't necessarily because they have an inherent love of it. Sometimes they do, very often they do, but not always. A lot of the politicians simply go that way because it's the path of least resistance. There are people who can harm their electoral chances should they not go along with this militaristic policies. That might change if people are able to organize enough resistance or organize to develop enough consequences for these politicians who are doing this sort of thing. Now, this isn't obviously an easy roadmap. There's no blueprint for how exactly to, manipulate state power to, dismantle the military-industrial complex. That doesn't exist. And especially when you have the Israel lobby being another potent force pushing for these policies, there's no easy solution to that. But the fact is that if we don't organize against it, if we don't continue to speak out, well, then it's guaranteed to get worse. But, as the years go by, as more critics of this policy and this system as a whole, mature and become politically active or maybe even go into politics themselves, that will have made a significant contribution to altering their preconceptions and hopefully their policies.
Hopefully. One other question that is actually talked about a lot now, especially after the ceasefire, is that who do you think is the how do you, I think the term is leash dog? Who is the leash? But is that correct?
Yeah,
the leash dog. Is it Israel or is it
the lapdog
lapdog?
is usually
Lapdog. Sorry. It's been a while since I studied U.S. politics. I forgot the term.
No, it's totally okay.
So who do you think is the lapdog between Trump and Netanyahu? Like, do you think one is pushing the other, or do you think it's clear who is who, or do you think it's more nuanced?
I think on a personal level, Netanyahu is certainly able to manipulate Trump more than the other way around, just by virtue of him being more deeply connected with this, neocon, pro-Israel Zionist policy consensus. The clean break document that I mentioned earlier in the 90s was actually prepared for Benjamin Netanyahu. He's been there for quite some time, back when Trump was a relatively apolitical Democrat. But in terms of America and Israel, that's a far more complex question. The American imperial system includes Israel, but Israel itself is a major constituency within that system, which gives it a lot of sway over the way that system operates overall. There are people who like to say that Israel controls the United States government. It's so difficult to separate the two states and the two regimes that's kind of a useless statement in my view. Many of the people who are Israel's most ardent supporters and ardent backers are also Americans, and they play roles within the American political economic system as well. Their interests can't be separated neatly into America and Israel. Their interests are this broader American-Israeli nexus. And so that represents most of Israel's global political power, are Americans and American corporations and, if not American, there's also European. But that's largely where Israel gets its power from. And so the Israeli lobby, while it's able to influence American politics, it is a part of American politics. And the fact that American weapons are what's driving Israel mean that, yes, overall Israel is reliant on this system, but as I mentioned, Israel is a part of this system.
It's very confusing when you think about it. And when you put it out, it's not really straightforward at all. One more thing about the ceasefire. Do you think it's something that's gonna stick, or are you less hopeful in? I mean, looking at the past, we've seen that Israel has broken many ceasefires right after each other. Do you think this is gonna happen again here? Because in Iran, we do have kind of the question, a big elephant in every room, that when are they gonna attack again? And it's not very certain that this is an actual ceasefire. We think we're still in a war. What do you think is going to happen?
No, I think this is probably a correct instinct to have. Israel and the United States over the last several decades, in the post-war period in general, have proven themselves to be unreliable negotiating partners with their adversaries. The only way you make peace is, with your adversaries, and if they can't trust you, then that peace is extremely fragile. We've seen Israel destroy the ceasefires in Lebanon with according to Hezbollah, over 3,500 ceasefire violations. Of course, not a lot of mention of this in the press. We've seen Israel renege on its ceasefire commitments in Gaza, claiming that they don't have to move to phase 2, and that if Hamas doesn't want to stay in phase 1, then they can go and resume their attacks. In Iran, the Israelis have been asking for guarantees from the United States. This has been reported in the Israeli press. Guarantees from the United States that were Israel to determine by its own mechanisms that Iran was in violation of some sort of deal, then Israel would be entitled to attack unilaterally again. So this is, again, a plan to violate the ceasefire. But there's no reason to believe that in the near term, the ceasefire will be extensively violated, mostly because I don't believe Israel could handle it if it were to be violated. And for this, I think we just need to look at the numbers game. Israel's interceptors, the Patriot missiles that intercept Iranian missiles, are very expensive, and they're very depleted. Within about 7 days of the 12 Days War, there are already reports in the Israeli press indicating that the Israeli military was running low on these sorts of interceptors. And if we look at companies like Lockheed Martin that make these sort of systems that can intercept things, their production capacity isn't really all that high. And they won't be able to produce and ship them off to Israel at a rate faster than Iran can fire in. So within a few weeks, Israel would essentially be undefended and taking a pounding from Iranian missiles. And this is to say nothing of whether or not other countries like Russia would get involved in supplying Iran to greater degrees. If that were to happen, well, Israel would be almost completely defenseless. There's no guarantee that would happen, but this is certainly something that Israel is and Israeli planners are thinking of in their strategic calculations. This ceasefire, such as it is, does seem like a time to regroup for the Israelis. Who knows when that period of regrouping will end in their view? Maybe they will try something else. Maybe they will try and build their stockpiles more. But if American industrial capacity is anything to gauge by, there won't be able to be enough stockpiles to ever have a sustained long conflict with Iran, which is why, of course, Israel develops this nuclear alternatives.
Because it is different, I guess, with the case with Lebanon and Gaza, because like Iran is acting and defending more and also attacking more, so they're less in a strong position, I would say.
Right, and Israel has to fly their planes all the way over, and the U.S. has to fly their planes all the way over.
Yeah.
They have to compete with the Iranian air defenses. Iran isn't flying bombers over Israel; they don't have to deal with that. So it's a completely different ballgame.
Yeah. One thing that we're really hoping for to happen, especially like since these events have taken place, is the dialogue between academics in Iran and in the West, especially in the US, which we think is very beneficial. It's something, again, it takes it gives less power to the press because there's a dialogue going on, and now we can hear each other talk and we can see each other's opinions and not be reliant on corporate media. We're really hoping. I guess this is part of. I think it's going to be part of the future where, because of social media, people are going to be more connected than ever before. And especially in the academic and intellectual circle, I think it's going to be very beneficial, even in policy making, even in domestic policy, not only foreign policy. Do you think that, for example, yourself or other academics in the West would be willing to do something like this? Are they more open than they were before?
I think so. I certainly would be. And I know that younger people, especially studying politics and studying international affairs, are more curious than ever about ways in which they can understand cultures beyond the lens of their own media and their own government. And I think that is one of the most important things to be looking for when we're talking about creating peace between two countries. The mingling between the intellectuals and people who are able to make their opinions known and help shape others' opinions. I think that getting more people together in the same room and making friends and making connections is essential to peacemaking.
Yes, that's what we're hoping for. Hopefully it will happen. And this is, I guess, a start. This is what we're trying to start this interview as well, trying to get your voice heard in Iran. I think this is also very, it's very heartwarming, I think, for Iranians as well, to hear the voice of someone who's not here, but actually is in support of them in somehow.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again.
I'm glad. I can see how it could be isolating to have, especially the big bad West just literally bombing on you.
I know. Hopefully things are gonna be better soon. Hopefully we can always hope for better stuff to happen. And thank you so much for having a conversation with us. Hopefully we can do it again later when other events have taken place and we can talk about it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Hope you have an amazing day.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.